Thank you so very much for being here with us, Ellen and myself, along with MP the Honourable Mr. Christopher Saunders, elected representative for Borden Town West. At the end of our last episode, you were speaking on your lamentations, I should call it, for your role in passing the legislation that mandated vaccination for expatriate workers in the island. Now, when I first heard of the Premier's intention to pass that legislation, I went on Radio Cayman and I said there is no way that this should be done because it is discriminatory in the first instance, and the Immigration Law actually did not allow that to happen. I was horribly disappointed in the opinion that was written by the, I think it was the Human Rights Commission, which, just to be upright and honest with you, it needs to be disbanded. The Human Rights Commission, you need to go have a look at the Human Rights Commission's website and tell me what has been their fight in this country for human rights. You will see that it is the strongest advocate for LGBTQ rights, and after that there's very little else that it has ever done. We have a prison. We have a prison that the Human Rights Commission should have been hammering the government to rapidly address the living conditions and the shortfalls and medical services and the quality of food and so on and so forth. And it has been, for the most part, silent. Yes, issued a publication here and there, but it has just, even if you reflect back on the debates on the domestic partnership bill, how fierce that it was, and how, you know, even Mr. Anthony Eden, former elected representative, he also came under attack from the Human Rights Commission as well because of the privilege that he had in the Legislative Assembly halls to speak freely, right? But back on track, sorry, before I get back on track with that point I was going to make and say, go have a look at the Human Rights Commission, because it's either way they're going to become a Human Rights Commission and advocate for human rights in the country, because if it's going to remain just an LGBT advocacy body, we don't need it, honestly.
Well, there are two things here. One, I think definitely we do need the Human Rights Commission. I think the issue is where the priorities lie, because I think many people have questioned some of the areas that they focus on as not being that of a priority. I can tell you, I have criticized them in the past because I take something as simple as the mortgage issue, where a lot of people will lose their homes.
Yes.
And I mean, housing itself or shelter is a basic human right, it's a basic need. And if you're going to sit there and allow the banks in some cases to take people's properties at some discounted prices and don't think that that's an issue, then that in itself, so that was one thing I was critical of them also. But just to kind of backtrack a little bit, the government did have the government does have the right, and even under the Constitution, to discriminate in certain cases in the public's interest. Now, one of the things, I give an example. I mean, in the past, we used to basically, you couldn't get a work permit if you were HIV positive.
Right.
Now that has basically been lapsed away, where people who are HIV positive are getting work permits, and they're basically this whole human rights issue. Now that is something I believe that we should be allowing people into the country that's HIV positive, but that's a different story for a different time. And
right.
You know, you can do it separately. But going back to Mr. Eden, I can tell you first and foremost, that was one of the persons, he seconded just about every motion I brought in my first term. And I can tell you one thing, that's one of the most decent, hardworking, honest individual that that I've ever worked with. And I can tell you, I do miss serving with him in the Parliament. I mean, and there's a reason I went to him to literally second all my motions, because what he brought when we were going through that process, he brought a lot of historical knowledge, a lot of little stuff. He was there to say, well, you know, Chris, we tried this before. And one of the things that had really was my first political lesson, I wouldn't say lesson, but observation, is we had took a motion to increase the amount of, increase the minimum sentences for child molesters and so forth. And I had about maybe, if I had about 15 to 20 people reach out to me on that to discuss that issue, that we create a motion. I'll probably say I had plenty. But then one of the issues that we brought up was the free over-the-air rights for World Cup football, which FIFA designated certain games as being should be free. But because people had to be paying for these subscription on TV, there was no way we could actually get the free World Cup games. And let me tell you something. I had over 400 people reach out to me about them free football games. And I'm sitting back and I'm kind of like, child molester is
16,
but
free football games,
400 people. I remember just like saying,
where's our priorities?
Well, again, and let's be realistic. Many of the challenges that we have today, if we're going to be brutally honest, we have had people who have warned us, don't do this, don't build this way, I mean, many different stuff, and we have ignored them.
Yes.
And so we can't sit back and say that we didn't know. The bottom line is we knew.
We knew.
But we made the decision. I mean, people, I remember, I told my representative from Bodden, Roy Bodden and Gilbert McLean, were telling people don't sell the land.
Yes.
If you need money or something, lease it. Don't sell the land. Leave it for your children. They call them socialists and call them everything under the sun.
Yeah. But now what do we have now?
What is the issue now?
What is the issue now?
We had politicians, you go back to even the 70s and 80s, we're talking about the housing issue in Cayman. People, they basically even said that for all of these developments, we had to set aside we wanted to create a fund where they set aside a certain percentage of these development money to go into housing for Caymanians.
Yes.
What happened to all of those stuff? So we can't sit back and say we didn't know. And the challenge that we have as a people, and this is where I think people are now coming to that realization. We now live in a world where people want instant gratification. They want everything instantly. And we need to look back and say to people, listen, this is not going to be fixed overnight. This is the most that we can get to within this year, this period of time or whatever. You look at the Yolanda Ford report, look how old that report is. It spoke about a lot of different issues. So people can't say they didn't know. We have had politicians, whether it be Jonathan Pierce, whether it be Michael Miles, all those guys have gone out, spoke about those reports, have highlighted those findings in those reports. And why? They get ignored. And you know why that is? Because like with most things, until it impacts you directly, until you feel it, people don't see it as a priority. And therein lies the issue.
You know, I got to say, agree 100%. All these issues, it's not that we're not aware or we're aware of them. One of our greatest downfalls in this country is that we do not recognize our own and accept advice and instruction. If you bring it forth, it's okay. Let's go back to the vaccine issue. We were listening to somebody from the outside when our own native Caymanian who had the knowledge, who was quite qualified, was totally ignored. We have ignored our own people for so long, and we have put ourselves in this mess that we're in today. Okay? We don't have nobody else to blame. But now, how do we fix it?
I'm going to share something with you. And this goes back to the essence of
we're going to get back to that vaccine.
Building back. We can answer for another show. This comes back to the essence of building back that pillar that's called a community. I'm going to share something with you that, and this is the nerdy part of me, because I be up late at night. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of research. I enjoy that. I love that kind of stuff. You probably would have seen a video where this guy said, my grandfather walked 10 miles to work. My father walked 5 miles. He says, I'm driving a Cadillac. My son is driving a Mercedes. My grandson is driving a Ferrari. But my great-grandson will be walking again. And he says, why is that? Wow. He says, because tough times create tough people. Tough people create easy times. Easy times create weak people. And weak people create tough times. Every 4 generations, that's how long it takes for that reset. And I'm going to share something with you now. Every 4 generations, every 80 years, we have that global reset. The last global reset was 1945, at the end of the Second World War, when they met with Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and they came up with the World Bank, the IMF, World Trade Organization, everything. Every 80 years. 80 years from 1945 is what? 2025. You see the drum start beating for the war, drum start beating, because that's how long it takes for us to forget the lessons of the past. 4 generations. There is nothing that we can literally do to stop this reset. It has been like that. And what has made it even more challenging, that this is the first time ever in human history, first time ever, that 4 generations are working together at the same time. You'll find an 18-year-old working alongside an 81-year-old.
Yeah.
And here's the issue now. And I'm going to show you why that has been, we have created a generational problem that they're going to require a generational solution. And yesteryear has gone by. Because the birth rate, or sorry, the mortality rate was so low, most of the time the grandparents will leave their house to the kids and the grandkids. But because the grandparents are living longer,
yes,
the house that they would normally pass on is not being passed on, and as a result we literally have a generational shortage of housing. And the scariest part about it, I'm not going to sit down and tell you that this is just something that's new. People have been saying this from the 70s, they've been saying this from the 80s, that this problem was coming, and people are referring to them as chicken little, that all these people talking doom and gloom. And now you find in every country around the world, young people are finding themselves either staying in their parents' home longer, or they can't afford this, they can't afford that. It is part of the global reset. And the thing about it is this, you go back to the same thing in 1945. The United States reshaped the world in the model of American capitalism. At that time, India was nothing, second most populous country. At that time, China was not most populous country. And say what you want to say, Castro himself had said it in the 70s.
Yes.
The day every Indian, every Chinese wake up and say that they want 2 cars outside their door, we're going to have an environmental problem. But of course, they ignored it because of what? So we can't say that we didn't know. Now, to answer your question, my job and that of others around me that I'm working with is recognizing that this reset is coming. And our job, we can't stop it. This is a global reset. It is going to happen. Our job is to make sure we prepare our people, that we're insulated our people, so that when it does happen, the impacts is not as bad as it should be, because we're basically prepared. We're basically ready. And that is what we need to do now. Again, people don't like to think about these things long term, but that was the whole issue behind the pension, because there are 2 things behind that old motion of people basically getting people pension to pay off their mortgage. The high inflationary environment isn't going anywhere anytime soon. You saw the video in which when you look at the impact of inflation on people buying power, you know, what 50,000 is worth 5 years from now, what 50,000 is worth 10 years from now, and so forth. Yet your pension is losing money. Your borrowings are going up. Why not then take current money today and apply it before it ends up losing value? You can't pay for it. That's basic common sense. But the one thing that we can't get around, and the Bible talk about this, is greed.
Yes.
Greed has been one of the things. And I mean, you look at even the US, and they themselves went on a path with high interest rates, where most of the time the inflation is normally driven by consumer demand. It's driven by demand going up or supply coming down, or a combination of both. They were basically going out there, raising interest rates to curb demand. What did they find out? Inflation wasn't being driven by demand, it was basically being driven by the corporate greed side.
That's right.
Now, how do you go and deal with that? And then when you do have people who get up and speak about these corporations, what it is that they're doing,
and they're
the ones who are basically taking all the licks. You know what I mean? So, at the end of the day, like I said, go back again to what the Bible said. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And as you said, rejected it. So we can't say we didn't know.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, my job, and I'm using my platform that I have to educate the people as much as I can, to put it out there as much as I can. And hopefully at the end of the day, people can say, you know what? Some problems we can fix in the short term, some problems in the medium term, and some problems are going to require a longer term solution.
You know, you are so right. I'm sorry, sis, that when I look back as you were talking, I was thinking back of Dr. Frank McFeel, who, I think it was in the early 90s or something, exactly what is taking place now, he laid out that these things would happen. You know, as a sociologist.
And his thing time longer than rope, yeah.
And then his thing time longer than rope, and then in the parliament. But again, another brilliant Caymanian mind ignored, because he's Caymanian. And the level of greed in this country, and from the top down, and who controls this country is not you politicians. Okay? You don't control this country to some degree, and forgive me if you think I'm speaking. No. You know, but the greed, greed is at that level that we are now the foreigner in this country, and when I say the foreigner, we have a lot to say about the little common workers, who is not the issue.
You're talking about the small work permit holder versus the foreign
I want to
investor.
say,
Versus the foreigner in the investor, versus the millionaire that are flying in every day on their Lear jets.
I will say this much, and I've said it in a previous video that really went viral when I spoke about bad mind. In this country, as you know by law, we require every company to be at least 60% Caymanian owned. And if you can't get a 60% Caymanian partnership, you can apply for a LCCL, a local company controls license. For 30 years, 3 decades, more than 30 years, we had 6 LCCLs in this country. CUC, Cayman Wireless, Asphaltic, McAlpine, ESO, and Texaco. 6 for 30 years. Today, we have over 300. I'm old enough, or young enough, just when I look at it, that I would see a Caymanian with a new car, and someone said, "Where you got that car from?" "Oh, you fronting." So somebody went out and found a Caymanian partner
to
build a business with, and we would prefer that person have nothing, and whoever it is that comes in owns 100%, because we wouldn't want to see our people. Let me tell you something. When we talk about Cayman being a place where people are united, you know what? Before you can have common unity, you need to have a common purpose. Before you can have a common purpose, you need to have a common struggle. That is why when people come together, like after major events like hurricanes and so forth, people come together, and because they all have a common struggle. But the minute the struggle go away, they go right back to their selfish, whatever ways that they want. I say all that to say this. Until we can find our own way to start being happy for our own people, I'm going to tell you something. We're not got nobody to blame but ourselves.
I totally agree.
Every foreigner that we talk about, I can tell you, is a Caymanian that take out a work permit
for them.
You understand me? That's reality. For all of these companies we talk about, the majority of those companies are still owned by Caymanians. That's the reality of it. And I've always said this to people. The special interest in this country is not as bad as people think it is. It is worse. You understand me? And until, like I said, we made that connection to say to people that this is how this is affecting. Now, I can tell you right now, I didn't see it anywhere more than the expansion of Cineco. And going back to the prayer that we started with when I talk about we build on foundations, the whole idea behind it is building institutions. One of the last institutions we built in this country was Cineco 20 years ago. God bless Gilbert McLean for doing it. He came under a lot of immense political pressure from people who didn't want him to do it. And if it wasn't for Cineco, many Caymanians wouldn't have no insurance today.
Totally agree.
You understand? But guess what?
And the elderly would have no care.
Exactly.
Have no care.
So it goes back again to the point, in the time where we should be focused on building these institutions. Instead, we love based on the individual and so forth. And until we start building institutions, and those institutions we need to start has to be built back at the community level. And the thing about it is, and one of the major institutions at the community level is the church. And we have sat back and we have watched the church come under attack, come under different stuff. And it's funny because the same young lady I was speaking to on the way here, I said to her, "Does your child go to church?" She said, "Not as much as he should." But I said, "When you were growing up younger, you went to church every Sunday." She said she had no choice. So I'm like, so if you are growing your child different than how you grew up, why do you think your child is now living a different life than you did? If you're happy with your life and happy with your foundation, and those first 7 years are the most important of bending that child the right way. You understand me? That is where we need to get back to. And I tell you what, that's one of the things I'm happy with. I mean, people can say what they want to say about this premier, but I can tell you this much. I worked with her. I know where her heart is. I know where her intention is. And a lot of people give her a hard time on education. And the only criticism that I will have with her on education is that she needs to basically come out more and tell the parents, you also need to step up. Everything can't go to the teacher.
Exactly.
You understand me? So you can't be sitting down talking about government getting too big when you put all the blame on education on the government without the community or the village or the home playing its part.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? And that is where the issue needs to get to.
That's right.
But
we need to get
nobody wants to get up and say to the parents, them, listen,
You must
need
take
to.
responsibility.
I can tell you something. I may get in trouble for saying it, but I can tell you. I've been doing my back to school now for about 10 years now. I've had kids that from primary school to high school, now they're getting college grants. And I could have told you from 5, 6, 7 years ago which kids were going off to college. When I go and I would deliver a bag to them or something, thank you, Mr. Saunders. I mean, the politeness, the this and that, whatever. Just last summer, I had one child look at me and said to me, "Oh, Mr. Chris, thank you very much for this bag. I really appreciate it." His mother turned around, "No, you don't need to thank him. He's just doing his job as a politician to get vote." No,
there you go.
Hold on, no, I hear the worst part. I said to her, I said, "Baby love, ask that question. Where am I?" I said, "You realize this is not even my area? Which vote I can get from you?" This wasn't even in Bottom West. That's the worst part. I was actually in a different person constituent. Someone reached out to me. But for her to stop the child from just saying thank you.
What did she think she was doing to the child? It's not what it wasn't going to affect you as much as it's affecting her child to believe that he's entitled to something, or she or whoever.
She corrected the child.
Yeah.
She literally stopped the child. You don't need to thank him.
Well, I wouldn't say that she corrected the child. I would say she led her own child astray.
You know what I mean?
The child was on the correct path, and she led him astray.
You know, and I sit back and I had to really say to her, like, which vote? I said, "You can't vote for me. This is not even my area."
But you see, that is a problem with us in this country. We think that we're in some, and again, I might get in trouble for saying this, that we're entitled to certain things. You know, what we're entitled to is to live a life that other people can gain from us, and we can be of help to other people. We can't be a people that is always looking for a handout rather than being there and go back to our basic things that we grew up with. We taught, like you told a young lady, and you know, manners. Be appreciative for what happens in life. And you know, give thanks to God and live your life and do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. But I think I'm getting a little bit off track here, and a lot of stuff's going through my head. So let me give my dear sister an opportunity to talk.
No, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's great just sitting here listening to the two of you sharing perspectives and facts and truths. And frankly speaking, I'm really not too worried about whether or not I get in trouble for anything I say on this show, because I'm just here to push back against evil and what is not good, and that is going to bring me into conflict with many people in the country. So
I wouldn't say many. No, I would say the minority, because I'm going to tell you one of the things.
The minority always makes the most noise.
I can tell you one of the things that I am blessed with, and I'm saying this to sound political, but I have a constituent base. I mean, my constituent is mostly middle-class aspirational Caymanians. And
say that again.
Middle-class aspirational Caymanians.
One more time.
Middle-class aspirational Caymanians.
I asked him to say that so you would hear that the third time. If there's anything that you take away from this show, it is to be, at the minimum, a middle-class aspirational Caymanian. Carry on.
And as a result, they don't mind me being blunt. As a matter of fact, they actually encourage me to be blunt. They want me to speak up. And the truth of the fact is, I couldn't say many things I say and do many things that I do without their support. And I mean, I have some prayer warriors that every morning my WhatsApp message will come in for the people that are praying for me. I always tell people that come from my house that are praying, Mother. You know what I mean? And they're the people for me that really allows me, because I can tell you, if some of the constituents or pockets, I should say, of other constituents, people couldn't have that level of freedom. So I can carry a consumer protection bill and not worry about what this one or that one thing, because the merchant class don't live in my area. The people I represent are the consumers. They're the ones who want protection. And for people to sit back and believe that in this day and age, in 2024, to not have consumer protection in a society that is where it comes from base society for taxes, but you have no protection for the people who are spending their hard-earned money, it is frankly
ludicrous.
One of those things.
Let me just throw two words in here, please, because you said earlier that it's not the politicians who run the country. But Chris started off by laying it out very clearly that the people found the government. right? It is the electorate who needs to be at the table. Listen, you're talking about 19 people trying to stand up against billions of dollars. All right? The people that own those billions of dollars, they want to have their way. The only thing standing between them having their way, not to our benefit and the politician, is the electorate. And you know, if there's one thing that I'm going to do over the next year, it is to try to champion the cause of having a educated and active electorate, because for too long we have gone into the polling booth, we put down an X, never seen from again, except when you're on Facebook slamming politicians about what they didn't do or what they did do, but you never picked up the phone one time and said, I heard this, can I have your position on this? Or, you know, I see this issue and here's what I think is the solution for it. I may be wrong, but I just share my views with you. Can we have a town hall meeting where we can sit down and discuss this? Can we engage? Can we participate in the democratic process, right? And it's ludicrous of us to think that we as the electorate can vote a handful of people into the House. And that they can bat off and they can defend everything.
This is my WhatsApp. How much charges you have there?
2036.
This morning when I started,
that's the unanswered. That's the unanswered.
This morning when I started, it was about 2,400. It was about almost 2,400. I guess I'm lucky enough to say that I do have constituents, at least for my constituents, they literally will send me messages. I mean, up to yesterday, I got one that sent me an issue that was going on in a different school. They said, Chris, please send this on to the premier and let she see what's going on. I sent it on to the premier and I said, wrote back to her, it's done and so forth. So, I mean, I go through, I mean, some of them is FYI information. So I kind of scroll through and would directly pick out. And by the time tonight is finished, this may be down to about maybe 18 or 1900. But tomorrow morning again it's going to jump up. Like I do have some good prayer warriors and so forth. About 75 of them every morning. I look forward for a message from them in that regard. You know what I mean? Like I ignore them and I can tell them to stop praying for me. You know what I mean? But I can tell you. But I want to say something here before we close. I recognize we're there. We have our challenges. No country around the world doesn't have challenges. But I can honestly say to you that despite our challenges, we still got a bright future. Cayman is still one of the best places on this planet you can live. And the things that are wrong with Cayman can still be fixed with the things that are right with Cayman. But we just need to get the right people that are focused enough to do it. And people need to start thinking more long term, and as opposed to very short term, very myopic in their own views. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, when the sun shines on the righteous, it shines on the unrighteous too. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things we need to focus. But I can tell you straight up, we got a good country. You know what I mean? And the people who should be running it should be the voters. Because that's who it is that we work for. You know what I mean? And I can honestly say, like, I am blessed. I've had other MPs said to me, you know, Chris, I wish I had your kind of voter base and so forth. Because they're very tuned in. You know what I mean? So any opportunity I get to communicate with them, I have no choice. And that's one of the reasons why I send messages out in bulk. Because it saves them from reaching out to me to ask me this question. I just beat them to the punch. And it's kind of weird. I mean, even the pension video, I had people coming to me and I had to call the guy. I'm like, find a speech ready, the pension stuff, and let's see what we can put out there. Because they are engaging.
And let me tell you how far your reach is, right? And this is one of the evidence pieces of evidence of being a good leader, being connected is, I receive your bulk messages, and everybody knows that I'm in West Bay Central, and I am very much connected to what's going on with the Borden Town West because of the way that you choose to disseminate your information. Now, I know that it's been a wonderful discussion. This part and even in the first part, but we haven't even scratched the topic. We haven't scratched the surface on the topics that I wanted to discuss.
You want to invite me?
Feel free. You're gonna have to, because 4, 5, and 6.
And they want to invite me, that's fine.
And also, what you didn't know was we are actually going to do a series on the vaccination program.
Okay.
And so we'd like to invite you to participate in that series, and the discussion needs to be had. There may be some explanations from the government that has not been put forward that the public should know. But there's a lot of investigations, a lot of discussions that needs to be had on that, and we're going to run a series on it, and the series will last for about 8 weeks. And so thank you very much for accepting the invitation from my client.
I think that's actually pretty good, because it's important for us, not that we make mistakes, but that we learn from mistakes.
Yes.
Because if we do have another pandemic coming up and so forth, and again, this seems like something that's not going to go away, at least we know how to respond. This was the first time in 100 years we had something like this.
Yes.
So no one was alive that could have advised us how to deal with this. So this was still something brand new. But the most important thing for us now, unlike 100 years ago where you couldn't document things the way in which you can document, is for us to document it now, so that if this happens another 100 years from now, people at least can look back, look at what it is that we did, the lessons we learned, to make sure that, well, this is what it is that we did. But back then you didn't have the technology that we have today to record the things that we have.
Yes.
So it's certainly been a great discussion.
It was definitely a good show.
It's definitely a good show.
Nice with the name.
And we just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for staying tuned to A Good Show. Join us again next Sunday at 7 p.m. on Cayman Life TV, channel 33 on Logic, for another episode of A Good Show.
You can also join us on Tuesday on Cayman Life TV at 7 p.m. So it's Sunday and Tuesdays. Yes.
Thank you. God bless you.
A Good Show is brought to you by the kind donations of private sponsors like yourselves and the support of companies such as Media Warehouse, 7 Miles of Grace, H. Philippi Bank's Attorney at Law, Dragonfly Cayman, and others. To become a sponsor, an advertiser, or to make a donation, email agoodshow@christian.ky.